happen. Our next speaker is a British inventor of jet suit that you can wear and fly. I really want to try it. I'm going to have this talk and request with him after his presentation. So he's also the founder of Gravity, the company behind this great invention. Put your hand together, please, and welcome with me, Mr. Rيتشارد براوننج.
Flight. It's a subject that has, I think, inspired lots of people over the centuries, and certainly for me, it's a subject that I think I can trace my original inspiration back to some old VHS footage that I found not that long ago, actually, when I used to fly model gliders with my late father. My whole family background was from the world of aeronautics and flight, although I spent the last 16 years in the oil industry, actually as an oil trader for BP. So I've been here before, about 5-6 years ago, but for entirely different reasons. I had no jet suit with me then. I hatched this idea that maybe you could tackle the challenge of human flight in an entirely different way than sitting inside a flight vehicle with a stick or a yoke and being inside that machine. What if you went back to the minimalist you could go, and what if you used your brain from the balance point of view, and your body is the flight structure? I can lean on a table and put most of my weight on it and quite happily stay there for a while. If I just swap the table out for something that supports me from a thrust point of view, then why can't I try and fly in that way? Sounds ridiculous. There was no plan at all when I started doing this alongside my day job in evenings and weekends. I just thought it was an awesome challenge to go, and very relevant to this organization or this event, just go and play. So this is the journey. I suppose part of the inspiration, in addition to my family background, was I used to do a lot of ultra marathons, and I used to do a lot of training in my lunch breaks and things. I used to be in the British Royal Marines Reserve as well. I used to like challenging myself from a physical point of view. So I used to be able to do something close to this, not really anymore, unfortunately. But if you can hold your body in that position, then you'd think, you know what, leaning on some form of propulsion surely can't be that hard. So very much inclined towards getting out there, getting my hands dirty and trying things. We started playing around in about March 2016 with these. You'll get familiar with this sound. This is a micro jet engine. It's literally like the same kind of thing you have on a jet fighter or the aircraft I've got to fly out with on this evening. For the technically interested in the audience, it's a centrifugal compressor like a turbocharger rather than a linear compressor, but other than that, it's a jet engine. That little guy on my arm, well, I've got strapped to an aluminium tube just to go and try it, puts out about 22 kilos of thrust, about 50 pounds, and it only weighs about 2 kilos. It's pretty impressive. That one stage alone dismissed most of the assumptions that most sensible people would have listed on a piece of paper as to why you should never go and try this. It's going to rip my arm off. The 120,000 RPM spindle is going to torque my arm. It's going to twist it. It's going to be impossible to fight like a gyroscope. It's going to be too hot. I'll never go anywhere near the heat and the fuel. And turns out all of those are rubbish. It was fine. It was like holding a fire hose. It just pushed gently. So inspired by that, there's obviously only one thing to go and do. Go and get two and a field. So, same theme again. Identify what you can go and do, very much in a manner of playing, and go and have a go and just try. So we've now got the fuel tank in the backpack and one engine on each arm. And you can see I was actually starting to be able to jump around and experience some of the thrust. That's now 50 kilos. You'll notice the pattern coming here. If 2 works, how about 4? And you'll see I'm really not coming down so quickly at this stage, because that's over 100 kilos of thrust, which sounds all very scary, but when you add up my weight and the weight of the equipment, that was still not enough thrust to get me off the ground. And I was starting to realize, this idea of balancing, if I start to fall this way, well, I naturally put my hand out. So that's the same thing if there's thrust. Anyway, we tried lots of different experiments, started putting them on the legs. This didn't work so well. The failure here, but it was all in the spirit of learning, was trying to put a tether on my back. it was a nice way of avoiding falling over in that farmyard, which I did a lot of, but it created another vector, another force, and one that I couldn't see. So I'm trying to balance with 4 limbs, and then every now and then I get pulled over to one side. That made it very hard. This was a failed experiment. We had lots of failed experiments. I could fill the whole 25 minutes with failed experiments. That was just terrifying, frankly. The model of having them on the arms and the legs, though, started to really work. But I had no real textbook to learn how to do this, so I just sort of hopped about like this, trying to get the feeling of the balance. You can see all the dust was kicking up. On the legs was a real problem, because every now and then they would take in the hot exhaust from the arms and just melt all the turbine blades out of the lower engines. The air coming out of those is about 1,000 miles an hour, so they're quite violent. And anyway, I was very happy with myself that I hadn't fallen over. This is 2 engines on each arm, pretty much what you saw in the first clip before I walked on, but an engine on each leg, because we figured, your legs are good at taking weight, but you can see here, see what happens? I just bend my leg, and it's like this human instinct. You feel like you're going to fall, so you start bending your legs, which is fine normally, unless you've got 20 kilos of thrust coming out the back, in which case, as soon as you bend your leg, you rotate. However, after 8 months of evenings and weekends where my wife must have thought I was pretty crazy, and I didn't really tell anybody I was doing this, and I was still an oil trader at the time, we managed to do this. So this is 8 months of R&D, and we managed to go and do what was supposed to be fairly impossible. It's still probably one of the most important points in the journey. Look at that, I'm still fighting my leg. But you can see, there you go, that was a 6-second flight. From that point onwards, it was really a question of trying to refine and improve it. So I've got a little collection of clips here which will show you some of the, well, now this is event 90, and country 30 that we've gone and flown in 2 years. So this is a little, you can turn up the sound a bit on this one. You might notice the soundtrack. We've blatantly stolen that from probably you know where. You can see for yourself, the countries we've gone to has been amazing. All of the equipment ludicrously packed into 2 suitcases. So if you see me going through an airport with 2 Samsonite black-looking innocent suitcases, there's a 1,000 horsepower jet suit in them. And I don't want to tempt fate, because who knows, I've got to get on an airplane this evening, but we've only been stopped, I think, twice, and even then you just show them some pictures of what it is, and there's nothing in the rule book that says you can't travel with the jet suit. I mean, at the end of the day, they're metal tubes, metal cylinders with a rotating spindle. And just from a technical point of view, they run on diesel or jet fuel. They're pretty much similar fuels, so we just turn up somewhere. We've even in the early days gone to a sort of local gas station and had to get some fuel and then go flying. So we've been all over the world. I've done all sorts of TED Talks and things. There's a story up there in the Q&A if you want to ask me about from an investment point of view. I accidentally raised £500,000, $650,000 in a car park in the very first event from the Drapers. I haven't got time to go into that. That was an unusual one. There's Mr. Cruz there as well. We did stuff with him. It's been a pretty ludicrous journey. I throw this in, I'll probably cut this short in a minute, but any Ken Block enthusiasts, this was about 2-3 months ago at Goodwood, the Festival of Speed in the UK. We had a bit of fun chasing Mr. Block around in his Huna truck. Anyway, I'll cut that short. There's loads of this on our Instagram site. It was good fun, although I think Ken could have probably run me over at any stage. What's quite fun about this is that, yes, this started out as a journey of doing something just for the sheer joy and pleasure of taking on the challenge, not knowing at all if it was going to work. But actually, I'm quite proud of the fact that we now, within 6 months of launching the company, are actually a profitable, money-earning company. We're not burning through VC money just hoping to change the world in 20 years' time. This actually is a money-making business, not only from the events, but we train people to fly. And I've got a clip coming in a second which will show you one of our flight candidates just recently who within a day on the flight, on the safety tether, learned that balance thing. It's very much like riding a bicycle or learning to ski. You just get it at a certain point. You'll see the progress he made within, like I say, probably about 10 goes over the course of a day. So that tether's not helping him at this stage. So he vectors down, he flares out slightly, comes down. He's playing around with that vectoring to try and maintain his balance. See, that kind of hover, I mean, you could remove the tether at this stage. That was after 1 day of training. So there's not many things you can learn to fly within 1 day. And that's the last suit we sold for about $440,000. We kind of prefer having people come to us and we teach them how to fly, and then we kind of lend them the equipment at the events we fly at and stuff, rather than just handing somebody a 1,000 horsepower jet suit. I've thrown this clip in as well. We've done quite a lot of stuff with the UK and US and various other militaries. Frankly, I spent 6 years in the Royal Marines Reserve, and I've got a big network there, and it's just super fun playing with their toys. So this was a bit of fun. I was going to be flying on one of our new aircraft carriers, and I actually said, look, I'm going to be doing that anyway in a couple of months' time. Why don't you give me a really small, tricky boat, and I'll prove I can still go and land on it. So I just took off from that patrol boat. It was a really windy day, and the boat was under instructions to try and go away from me, try and lose me. And it's just ridiculous. I can't really impress on you enough that it's just so intuitive. I don't think about what I'm doing with my hands. I just think about where I want to go. So you'll see, I decided to just kind of get a bit of distance away from the boat. There's a lot of the footage cut out of this to kind of keep it short. But you look at this. So I thought, I know, I wasn't really supposed to, but I go and land on the bridge of the ship, even though it's moving. I'm not aware of the ship's movement at all, because I can just perfectly adjust as I go. Anyway, that was good fun, and I'm glad I didn't go swimming at that event. There's always a tiny chance you get a failure, and you never really want to do it in front of those kind of people. Anyway, this has proven a really big hit with kids and young people. We've flown at quite a few school events and done a lot of STEM events. There's a little collection. That was Shanghai. There's 4,000 kids in a stadium in Boston we did. We've done stuff wherever we can fit it into the diary. I've got a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old now and a 12-year-old. And if there's one way of getting them to stop looking at an iPad or an iPhone, it's to land a 1,000-horsepower jet suit at their school. Now, we aren't slowing down on the R&D. We've got a huge amount going on. The entire suit, unlike, frankly, the one I was flying earlier, which is a little bit of an older model, but anyway, I like it. Everything is 3D printed. This is a little snapshot of how the aluminium 3D printing works. Another whole subject. You could do an entire talk on this, but it's pretty awesome technology. It almost allows you to take an idea, produce it in a CAD file, on a computer screen, and just almost press print. It's pretty amazing for what we need anyway. A subject which, again, I could spend a long time talking through is the new frontier. Now we can fly around so well, we can train other people. We've got about 7 people on our team that can fly. That VTOL flight, in other words, the whole pointing the thrust down, taking off, flying around, landing again, we can do about 40, 50 miles an hour quite easily. But what's really intrigued me for a while now is the idea that once you're doing those kind of speeds, your body naturally starts leaning because of the airflow. Well, what if you started adding little aerofoils, in other words, wings? You almost need to just watch a Marvel film and then just take some ideas from the film. But if you add little wings, then surely if you start to generate lift from wings rather than lift from blowing all the air downwards, that's going to be a much more efficient way to stay in the air, and actually gives you the choice of either turning the power down of the engines and saving fuel, or using more of that power to propel yourself even faster. So there is loads that we have done behind the scenes. I had the privilege of doing the annual address to the Society of Experimental Test Pilots in LA about 10 days ago, where I spent an entire hour going through the ludicrous journey we've been on. You've got a couple of hints here in what I'm going to show you. But this is such an exciting subject, and this is what's really going to change the whole game alongside everything else we're doing commercially. This is an example of the kind of crazy testing we do. So that wasn't me actually, that was one of my colleagues, doing essentially a wind tunnel test without a wind tunnel. You make the whole world your wind tunnel and drive 40, 50 miles an hour backwards in that truck, which doesn't do much else good apart from drive backwards on an airfield. And that's led to things like this. This was a test we did for a BBC show about a couple of months ago, and shows you kind of where we've got to. That big wing on my back, I feel funny showing that really, because it turned out that wasn't great. I'd never flown with that wing before we did this shot, so I just treated it as an R&D exercise. So you can see the leg wing. You basically just move your legs apart. The leg wing opens out just like a wingsuit. There's 2 little pockets that suck in air. There's air go in the pockets, it inflates. That lifts your legs quite flat. And then that upper body wing, the idea is that's supposed to then add even more lift. That upper body wing didn't really work very well, but it was good enough to get across this gap anyway. See, I've dropped my legs a little bit there. It's really funny when I look at some of these clips, you'll see the progress we've made and some of the other stuff I'll show you in a minute. Fairly quick. I don't know why one of my feet is pointing that way. I have no idea. I must be very imbalanced somehow. But that's not a bad, stable position. But you can see my arms. My arms are still pointing downwards, so I'm still blowing a lot of air downwards to keep myself in the air. We need to gradually remove that, where I'm almost entirely in that position. Anyway, it was a pretty good test. I didn't fall in the water. I delivered the piece of mail, which was the whole BBC thing. That's another whole story. I was supposed to deliver a letter to the Isle of Wight. It's a weird story, but it was a good excuse to go and fly to the island anyway. So that's an example of something. That was a pretty good milestone some months back. We've since gone even faster. The fastest we've gone so far is about 120 kilometers an hour with the wing. You'll see at the very end of this clip, at the very end of the talk, there's a really cool little sequence which will show you some of that. But if I take a step back and look at what we've done with these 90 events all over the world in front of some amazing audiences like you guys, the impact, for any of you who were on the beach earlier 2 hours ago when I was doing the last of the 3 flights I've done while I was here, the impact on live audiences has been consistently pretty high everywhere we've been. So why don't we scale that up? Why don't we turn this into a race series? Why don't we have guys and girls learning to fly these and flying them round water obstacles so it's all safe? If you get a failure or they do something silly, you just fall in the water, the life jacket goes off, and you just float around feeling sad of all the work you've got to do to fix it, but it's safe. So why not use racing as the mechanism to drive the entertainment and the inspiration, and also, a bit like Formula One, the technology development? As soon as I say mine's faster than one of yours, guess what? We end up rapidly improving, trying to push the boundaries. So what I'm going to show you is a little sequence that was shot a couple of months back of a 4-pilot race. Again, we only did it in one day. We just shoved everybody together and just started filming it, and there's some fun. You might need to turn up the sound again, please. There's some fun commentary over the top. So here we go.
It starts right now.
Let's see what happens.
Here he comes, here he comes. Absolutely crazy if he can make this move. That is a very neat move indeed. He's still a little bit under pressure. So they are giving it everything here. Is he going to go inside or outside? There's a terrific scrap here.
At the moment, side by side.
That is absolutely epic.
Wow.
We're on to the final lap of the race.
We'll wait
Who's
for
going to
it.
get it? Hangs onto the inside line, and they make contact. Oh no! That has totally destroyed
That's
his
a pilot
race.
feeling sad. There was actually 2 pilots who went in the water during this, but the way they've edited it, they'd show one. If we were in any doubt of how fun this was, the small crew of people watching this and the 4 of us pilots doing this, it was the most insane day. It was just like take Red Bull Air Race meets Formula One meets some kind of Marvel film. It was just insanely fun. In some ways, I don't really care if no one wants to watch this, because for us, doing it is just outrageous. You have this entire 3-dimensional freedom where you forget entirely what you're doing, and you're just intent on chasing that other person. It's pretty epic. It's yeah, that's the future of where we're going.
Iron Man, Marvel type.
There you go. There's me rabbiting on about the same thing.
A live audience.
So one of our ambitions is we've got, as I say, we were in Bermuda about 10 days ago doing a TED Talk, but I really was there doing a recce for hosting one of our races there. So we'd love to come back here and maybe not in the height of the summer. I know it's very, very hot. I came here last time in that time. But it would be amazing over water to execute one of these races, because they have an amazing impact on people. So that's one of our main, near-term focuses. Now, I've got a couple of things at the end, and I'm probably going to leave even more time for Q&A, because I prefer to really hear your thoughts rather than just listen to me. To get to this stage, and bearing in mind the theme of this whole event is around play. Play is often about doing silly things and doing things that on the face of it look like they're not going to work or they've got no point. And as adults, we grow up, I think, all too quickly usually, especially with school and academia telling us to stop playing around and follow the textbook. To get to this stage, we had to have a very clear ethos of having an idea, trying to identify how we could test that idea almost the same day, and learn from, frankly, spending most of the time failing. As long as that failure was recoverable. If you can't get back up again, financially, reputationally, because you really upset somebody, or physically, because you've just broken both your legs, that's not a great test. So as far as possible, yes, we've taken risk, but we've always made that risk recoverable. So what I'm about to show you now, we don't usually show too many people this. This is a no-holds-barred 90 seconds of all of our fails. So here we go. A lot of these are actually either pilot error or fuel. That was pilot error. There's nothing wrong with the equipment there. He just didn't like the flag. That was a compressor stall for any jet engine enthusiast. I knew that failure was coming. Let's see the benefit of doing it in water. It becomes an entertaining drama rather than anything more worse. This was a big one. Look at that. You can see the life jacket there. It's very clever. We make the suits buoyant as well as have that water-triggered life jacket. So that was contaminated fuel in the Maldives, and I nearly made the beach. Very annoying. A lot of these ones are where when you turn sharply, you're asking the thrust. This is another one. You're asking the thrust to keep you in the air and execute a turn. You need more power. You have to nudge the power up, and he failed to do that. In fact, he might even be in the audience. He was my partner here the last few days. And again. Yeah, that was the other crash at the... there you go. You've seen that one already. It's really not a problem going in the water. There was nothing wrong with the equipment. He just jumped too early. If you're going to do a superhero launch, you make sure you get the power in early. And then everybody's favorite, I don't know why, but yeah. Everybody just does that noise every time I show them. I'm going to take this one out. Yeah, that was an unfortunate one. This is why, even though we've had amazing reliability at these 90 events, and I'm glad to say that now I've done the last 3 days, we still have this humility that, you can't remove every risk. I mean, crikey, the airplane I'm going home on tonight isn't absolutely perfect. I'll happily say that. But if it gets an engine problem, it can pretty much do a bad effort of gliding, even with no engines at all. With this system, it doesn't do that. That's why we don't go super high. And if we're doing anything more aggressive, then it's over water, and then it's fine. I was going to end this as well, rather than end this on showing you all the falling over. I'm going to end this on what we shot in Bermuda last week, because it's really quite a nice little sequence. You turn up the sound again, there's some nice music on it. It's a nice little demonstration again of what we can now achieve with the leg wing, with the latest one we've got, which has got these little leg strakes, these fins. They have been a revolution, really, and it's so fun discovering these things. As you're flying along with just the leg wing, you've got something called yaw instability. If you ignore this leg, you actually slip and slide through the air like that because you haven't got a tail. So we worked out that if you put a leg strake on each leg, and it looks, again, something like out of a kind of superhero film, that creates like the feathers on the back of an arrow and means that you keep directional stability to a much greater extent. And it's been so good that I can actually fly along and actually kind of aerodynamically turn like a wingsuit pilot or even like a little jet fighter. So, yeah, if you want to enjoy this, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Now that was amazing.
Thank you.
I am so thankful that you're in one piece, to be honest.
Thank you.
Every time I see one of those bloopers, I say, oh my God, thank God he's here. Thank God he's talking to us.
Wouldn't it be stressful if I did the talk first and then said, right, the next 3 days I'm going to go and hopefully not add to that list? Yeah, it's much better doing it this way.
Oh my God, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for that amazing talk, and it's very inspiring. For some reason, I couldn't get the marvels out of my head when I was listening to your talk. So do you get that a lot?
I genuinely didn't wake up one morning and think, gosh, I have to make an Iron Man suit. But yes, as we developed it, we started to realize that actually it did have a sort of parallels with that character. And having even flown at Comic-Con, I've now got a whole new respect for the fact that science fiction does represent this unbounded human creativity. And in a way, we kind of look at that imaginary character and think, gosh, I wonder how many of those things we can kind of achieve.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, we had a very lovely experience with the graphics design team behind the Iron Man 1 film, reached out to us and said, all the stuff you see in the Iron Man 1 film where he's kind of all learning and smacking into the walls in his garage and everything, they had to make all that up, and they had to guess what it was like. And you see from especially the tether clip where I was like spinning around, they looked at all that and thought, oh my God, this is what we imagined it would be like. So that's been a fun process.
You can just give them your bloopers.
Yeah, no, indeed.
All right, thank you so much. And we'd like to open up the questions for the audience. We've got a question over here and a couple over there. So we start with this gentleman over here, maybe.
Could we put that tile up with the hashtags up as well? Just because I was going to say for Instagram and stuff, I put all the flights from the last 3 days on Instagram as well. So I don't know if you can, while we're talking, pop that up. But yes, questions.
Yeah, my question is, a lot of the R&D you talked about is basically the wingsuits and stuff like that, but you never talked about improving the engines themselves.
Yeah, the turbines.
Yeah, why is that?
That's happening as well. It's because I had 25 minutes to share a ridiculous, I could go on for hours with what we're going on. But yes, good question. So the next generation of turbines, particularly the ARM ones, are going to be insane. This doesn't sound believable, what I'm about to say, but the startup time for, again, any of you who saw it at the beach, you instigate start, and it takes usually about 60 seconds to come up to idle and then take off, which is still not bad, right? There's not many gas turbine aircraft that can do that. The next generation, thanks to some major changes internally, is going to be 8 seconds. You can just click start, 8 seconds later, go and take off. That's kind of getting superhero, almost. So that's coming. The next generation of ARM engines are going to be a tiny bit bigger, put out a huge amount more power. We've got some changes coming with the rear engine as well, and we've just built, we haven't shown anybody this yet, a monster of a machine where you actually steer it like a bicycle, so you're not taking any load up your arms. Not that it's difficult, but we've got about 1/4 of a ton of thrust, so you could just kind of haul. It's massive. You can carry massive amounts of equipment. So all of that's going on in parallel. And we've even built an electric version as well, but the challenge with the electric one is the energy density versus the weight of the batteries. But I put my then 10-year-old son, I've got 2 sons, so I had to spare one, on the safety tether, of course. And that worked reasonably well, but it's so hard because of the weight of the batteries. But yeah, loads of that is going on too. Okay. Yes.
All right. Would we take another question, maybe? Over here, the lady who has her hands up. Sorry. Can we wait for the mic?
I can relay if you want. I can just relay. Do I think it's going to be commercialized or commercial? Yeah, to be honest, the price is largely there to put off people unless they're really serious, because there's one way of making this really difficult to take around the world is if we hand them out to people and people smack into buildings and kill themselves. And there's nothing stopping me, other than my sense of self-preservation, just doing this and going up to 1,000 feet. But it's like a sports motorbike or a very fast car. You could easily throw that into a wall if you chose to just do that. I'm more happy having kind of trained professionals, our clients who've been through our training, or my own team, given these to go and play with. I don't want to just retail them out to people just to have a go and see what happens. In terms of commercializing them more broadly, they're very noisy, it consumes a lot of fuel, is potentially dangerous. It's like a Formula 1 car. You wouldn't want to go and just sell those to people to have a go at going up and down the street. Well, maybe here, I don't know. What's more cool, I think, is to use it as a platform to entertain, to inspire, and to push the technology. And if it leaves a trail of more consumable technology, then great. The first motor cars were noisy, smelly, inefficient, and rubbish compared to a horse. And yet, look where they've got to. So if we're seen as one of the first stepping stones, eventually, to a whole new form of human mobility, then cool. But in the meantime, we're going to keep this self-funding journey of doing what we're doing. So yeah, maybe, in other words. Maybe if somebody can solve the battery energy storage challenge, that suddenly changes the game. Yep.
Yes.
Next.
I think we've got a moment for one more question. All right, the lady in blue over here. Richard, can I ask you to step on the side here?
Oh, yes, I'll go over here. Sorry, who's asking a question? I can't see. Yes. I can't quite hear you. Can you find that?
Okay, sorry. I was saying, since we're on the subject of playing, and you basically started this thing because you wanted to play, how are you navigating this being used as something to have fun with, while in the future it could be used for something more serious, like defense forces, like actual like travel. How are you navigating moving from play to actually potentially maybe even very serious, very critical usage?
Yeah, I mean, the military thing, it's kind of different because I was in the military for a bit. I mean, there's the age-old argument that every technology gets looked at from an offensive point of view, if you see what I mean. Is that a reason just to not do anything there, or is it, from the search and rescue point of view, or getting people out of situations? I think, embrace the potential, learn as you go. I mean, that's a whole wider philosophical debate. I mean, it's not a major part of what we do. Frankly, the 10-year-old inside me loves going and playing. I literally am flying back to the UK tonight to tomorrow morning fly for the Royal Artillery to prove that if I was a person who would fix a heavy artillery piece, I could fly in and fix it in the field and fly away again. I'm literally doing that tomorrow. So, I mean, who wouldn't want to go and do that, because it's a ridiculous thing to go and do. But it's a really good question. How do you transition from a play you saw messing around, falling over in a farmyard, to something that wants to be a bit more grown up? That's really interesting, because most companies, I think, struggle with this. They start often from a small bunch of innovators and develop a technology like GoPro, for instance. I'm going to be slightly mean on GoPro for a second. Amazing breakthrough. They changed the whole attitude towards the quality of filming on a tiny scale. Would you argue that they've kept that pace of innovation up? Ooh, that's a hard one to really agree with. How do you scale, but also keep that, humble yet aggressive sense of exploratory play, and not just turn into a furred-up, large bureaucratic corporation? That's really difficult. I'm not saying GoPro is exactly that, but that's a really difficult one. I mean, we're pretty early stage. We're a couple of years, 2.5 years since we launched. We're still very much in the play stage. But that's a really good point. I don't really have an answer to that. I think keeping a watching brief on the risk of losing sight of that original spirit, but also being grown up and organized, and, I mean, delivering 90 events all over the world without incident anywhere, is, I suppose, speaks for itself. So it's a difficult balance. Good question.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you so much, Richard. That was delightful and lovely to see.
If I can just say, because I don't think the tile went up, so on Instagram, the handle, like I say, we've had fun filming here for the last few days. It's a take on gravity, as in fight it, take on gravity. It's all on there. So.
Take on gravity.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much again. A round of applause. Thank you so much. Yes. All right.